Good evening. Okay, we have heard from the politicians on all of today's big stories, and now it is your turn. We're live and we're ready to hear from you. This is Raw Politics, your call. As always, we are asking you three questions. So the first question we're asking you is, are there enough job opportunities for young people? Why are we asking you this? Because unemployment is down in Europe. I mean, that's great news. There's about 12.5 million jobs created since 2014, according to the European Commission. But, gender gap is also closing. The household income is rising. But at the same time, it's not all rosy because you have some 16 million Europeans who are jobless. They are unemployed, and 3.3 million of those are young people. So we're asking you, do you think that it's really tough for young people? Are there not enough job opportunities for the youth in the EU? Do tell us, call us, and let us know what you think on that topic. Effie, what's the second topic we're asking them?
Yeah, does the EU need a Buy Europe strategy? Faced with policies like America First or Made in China, now Europe is struggling to find its feet on trade. And of course, Brussels is trying to be tough on Beijing and its growing influence on Europe. And meanwhile, the United States is threatening to slap tariffs on everything from European helicopters or even paintbrushes or cheese. So this is the second question. Does Europe need a Buy Europe strategy? Call us, and of course, you can write the messages on Twitter.
Use Raw Politics as the hashtag. That's interesting because there's America First, there's Made in China, and then should there be a Buy Europe? All right, the third question we're asking you is, should British MEPs have full power after the European parliamentary elections? Why are we asking you this? So there's this news that the MPs and the British Parliament approved Theresa May's plan to delay Brexit. So by delaying Brexit, it means that there's a possibility that the MEPs will have to run in the European parliamentary elections. So in that case, should they have full powers? I mean, this is going to cause chaos in terms of the number of seats, with the different parties that have been divided among the different countries. So we'd like to know what you think on that topic. Full powers for British MEPs. And you know what to do. Our lines are open, and our team, Philip and Victoria, they're waiting for your call. The phone number, it's on your screen. It's 00800 3333 7002. The email as rawpaul@euronews.com, and use the hashtag #RawPolitics. We're already on Twitter. I'm already checking for your comments. And do look for us on Skype as well, because we want to see you. All right, we have some guests for you. Effie's going to tell us who is joining us.
We've seen some very interesting comments on that, and getting in on the debate with us are Hans-Olaf Henkel, German MEP with the European Conservatives and Reformists. Welcome. And Molly Scott-Cato, British MEP with the Green Party. Welcome to you too.
And we're going to have an interesting conversation with you both. We know that you are on different sides of a lot of topics. But before that, let's get the headlines, the latest headlines from our colleagues in Lyon with Isabel Kumar.
A very good evening to you, both Effie and Tessa there. Well, these are our top stories. From Berlin to Paris, the British Prime Minister is meeting with EU leaders to make her case for another Brexit delay. Theresa May met the German Chancellor Angela Merkel in Berlin before heading on to Paris for talks with the French President Emmanuel Macron. The charm offensive comes ahead of tomorrow's Crunch EU summit in Brussels, where any of the EU 27 leaders could veto another Brexit delay. Back in Westminster, the government has wrapped up another day of so-called productive talks with the opposition Labour Party as the two sides look to break the Parliament's Brexit deadlock. There are fears of a trade war between the US and the EU after Washington threatened the bloc with almost 10 billion euros worth of trade sanctions. It's in response to alleged illegal subsidies to Airbus. Washington claims that by providing launch aid to Airbus, the EU is causing American rival Boeing to lose market share. And Israeli voters have been casting their ballots to decide whether to hand Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu a record fifth term or turn power over to one of his former generals, Benny Gantz. Well, Mr. Netanyahu has been campaigning under the shadow of a corruption scandal, and the vote is widely seen as a referendum on his future. And those are our top stories. Back to you, Tessa and Effie in Brussels.
All right, thank you for that, Isabel. Now, again, we are asking you 3 questions tonight. Don't forget, call in because we want to know what you think. So what are the questions? The first question we're asking you, are there enough job opportunities for young people? Why are we asking this question? Because unemployment is down in Europe. That's great news, but actually it depends on where you're from in Europe, because you have a very high unemployment in, Effie, you're from Greece, so Greece, it's still high unemployment. Germany is doing a lot better, but the young people, they are still quite affected by this. 3.3 million are still unemployed. So do you think there are not enough job opportunities? Second question we're asking you, does the EU need a Buy Europe strategy? Why? You have America first, and the US is threatening to slap tariffs on many, many EU products. And then you have the Made in China policy that China does have. Some would say it's protectionist. So does Europe need a Buy Europe strategy? Now, the third question we're asking you, of course, is related to Brexit. We know that the MPs have approved Theresa May's plan to extend Brexit. So that would mean that British MEPs may have to run in the European parliamentary election. So if that is the case, should the MEPs have full powers? And because, by this time, they have supposed to have left the EU already. So let's start with that question, and I'll ask our 2 MEP guests here. So if the British have to run again in the European parliamentary elections, should they have equal powers as, the Germans, for example, when, the seats have already been divided, there's already been a plan for when the Brits leave?
Yeah, of course, if they stay in the parliament, they should have the same rights as anybody else in this parliament. And the 25 or 27 seats which have been reallocated to other countries, they shouldn't be then taken by those countries, because the Lisbon Treaty says very clearly this parliament should not exceed 751 people.
Yeah, but it doesn't talk about powers, does it? I mean, even if they're going to be here temporarily, right? I mean, is that not a consideration? It would have been annoying for those who were probably waiting for the seats.
Could they block whatever the European Parliament would try to decide?
They have 73 seats today, and look, if you start reducing their rights because they're here only on a temporary basis, then you create a precedent. There are other single deputies who stay only for a short time. Some know that before, some don't. Some, as a matter of fact, are joining the parliament now because somebody just went back to an own parliament. So I think there should be no 2 classes of rights in this parliament.
Okay, what about you, Molly? You're a British MEP.
Well,
what would you?
Can I start by celebrating the fact that I'm still here? We're still here because there are a lot of people in Britain who passionately believe that we're better off as part of Europe, and we're clinging on to our European citizenship and to our place here in the European Parliament. And friends like Hans Olaf here, I think, are supporting us in that. So that's really good to see. But in terms of, I will be standing for re-election, and it's going to be quite a strange election, I grant you that. But I think when we come back in the Parliament, it's not quite such an issue about our powers, because, as you say, we're 10%, and also we sit in the different groups. So we tend to work more in terms of the sort of political position we hold rather than for national interest. So to me, if there's a question of powers, it would be more important in the Council, because I think there needs to be some kind of gentleman's agreement that Britain doesn't block particularly important policy measures while it's not clear that we'll be here for the whole of the 5 years.
Right. Okay. Well, let's.
By the way, there's another argument I would like to say. I think it's in our own interest, because one of the reasons why I fight since quite some time to support the Remainers in Britain is that this Parliament, and as a matter of fact, the entire European Union, needs the British. For a number of reasons. They have a lot of common sense, and this...
We're not showing that at the moment, but thank you for that.
No, I have not given up on the common sense.
Very optimistic,
they are always
Hans-Olaf.
in favor of competitiveness, of decentralization, and so on, and I think that voice would be dearly missed, so we need them.
All right, let's get an opinion from our viewers. So we have Gary from Berkshire. Gary, it's good to hear you. What do you think? Should MEPs have their powers limited? Should they run after the European parliamentary elections?
No, I don't think they should. If we're in the club, we deserve to have all the powers that are allocated to MEPs. And I think this is really important for a number of reasons which have already been mentioned on the show. But I think there's a primary reason behind this. Brexit hasn't been delivered, and actually we're not sure if Brexit will ever be delivered. So if we look to restrict the options of MEPs from the UK, or even restrict MEPs coming forward for election, actually that maybe opens a bigger conversation in 6 or 9 months' time. So I think, yes, we should absolutely have full powers, but only if those powers are used responsibly. And as has been said on the show tonight, MEPs divide themselves into the different parties. So I'm not sure it would really make that much of a difference, to be honest with you.
Yeah, okay. And, but we had, we heard from Jacob Rees-Mogg earlier. I mean, he was kind of saying, okay, if we have MEPs in the European Parliament, we have a plan, this is what we do. And he's clearly not a big fan of the European Union, but yes,
so Jacob Rees-Mogg was basically trying to make Brexit more likely by threatening this. But I'm actually Jacob Rees-Mogg's MEP myself. So I responded to his tweet by saying, I'm very cooperative and I work very well in the European Parliament. And so, the people of the Southwest, if you really want to irritate Jacob Rees-Mogg, then you should vote for me in the election. And this was a very successful tweet. So I think, this can backfire. Unfortunately, Guy Verhofstadt was slightly played by that and said, we don't want you in. But, we shouldn't let the Brexiteers run the show here. They're actually a small...
But they are quite a loud voice.
Well, they're an extreme minority of one party in the British system, people like Jacob Rees-Mogg, and it does not represent the centre of gravity in Britain.
But is Brexit itself at stake and at risk with these European elections participation?
Well, when you say at risk, what I think is...
What I'm saying is that is it important what the UK people, voters, will vote?
Absolutely.
And the turnout, of course.
The momentum is shifting on Brexit, and what we have to do as pro-EU candidates in the election is to make sure that it's a celebration of European values and a celebration of the reasons we need to stay in the EU. And if the pro-Brexit people come out with all their Mr. Angry routine and all their sort of, intimidation and threats of violence, and I don't think that's going to impress anybody compared to the positive message that we'll have.
But what do you think about that, Gary, when you have Jacob Rees-Mogg saying, well, essentially they're going to be troublemakers if they have MEPs at the European Parliament? So you think that should just be let in?
Well, firstly, Jacob Rees-Mogg is the MP for the 17th century, nothing more. But he does represent, in some ways, a faction of British politics, which we've seen in recent days becoming a little bit more violent, more vocal in the way that they conduct themselves. But the thing that we have to remember is we may not like the message, but if we are to have this thing called democracy, we have to accept what's said. And if, unfortunately, that brings forward MEPs that wish to go against what is considered the norm, for the sake of democracy, we must accept that. As much as I dislike it, but we must accept that. Otherwise, we end up in a situation where we no longer have democracy.
And what do you think, Hans? If you hear, threats as in that sense that Jacob Rees-Mogg presented, you still fine with them being part of the European Parliament?
Well, let's not forget we are talking about a third referendum, as a matter of fact, because there was one in the 70s where Britain voted for getting into the European Union. Then there was one which suggested that they should leave, and I advocate a third one. And let's face it, the people who voted at that time were not exactly knowing what they voted on. And I think a third referendum where the government, and this will be my proposal, gives the British people a choice. For instance, they could say, okay, here is a choice. You have a Rees-Mogg no deal Brexit. You have Theresa May's Brexit, or you have a Remain. And now let the British decide. Meanwhile, they are so much more educated through all the discussions, so there's a reasonable way of
presenting the question again to them.
And
some would disagree,
and finishing the deadlock, because obviously the government is divided, the parliament is divided, and the public is divided, and nobody can make up its mind. So one, I think, should go back to the public. And they talked about democracy. I think a democracy which ceases to learn ceases to be a democracy.
All right, just reminding our viewers, so what we're talking about right now is should British MEPs have full powers after the European parliamentary elections? Because it seems now that MPs in the UK have backed Theresa May's plan to extend the Brexit deadline, so it seems like they're going to be part of the European parliamentary elections. So should they have full powers? The other two questions we're asking you is, are there enough job opportunities for young people in the EU? I mean, we have rosy unemployment numbers. It is down in Europe, but young people still are bearing the brunt of the crisis that we just had. And the other question we're asking is, does the EU need a Buy Europe strategy? I think the French already have this, isn't it? Made in France. But should Europe have that Europe-wide strategy to fight against, China? Some would call here a protectionist China, made in China. And you have the America First policy of the United States. So do call us. The number is 00800 333 7002. You can see it actually. I tweeted that number, so you can just check out, go on Twitter and see the phone number, and the questions are there as well.
And here we have a very interesting tweet that the MEPs could respond also about, of course, Brexit and our first question. And is Fionnuala Hendrik says, check EU legislation from 2002, and it's not possible to bind MEPs under EU regulations. So do you agree with what our viewer is saying for that?
Well, I don't really know what law they're referring to there.
I don't know.
So we'd have to look at that in detail. And
I have no idea what he talks about.
No,
I'm sorry.
In terms of limiting the powers, but also there's, I think if we can broaden that conversation, there's someone else, Shirley Kenyon, who said the majority want to leave the EU. It's the bloc who are making it difficult for us. And having someone else responded, no, it's your incompetent government.
This is what we have all the time. You should
Well,
see my Twitter feed. It's like that all the time. But I think that the first point is an important one, because while we're members, we have full members' rights, as Hans Olaf said earlier on. And I think that's important that we defend that. But personally, I've stood back a little bit, like if there's policy, if there's legislation that I know might go on beyond the end of this mandate, when I wasn't sure I could stay, I didn't want to take that on as rapporteur. So I think as British MEPs and in the Council, we have to be responsible there. And I think most of us have done that.
Well, that's a good point, because even in my political group, there are 19 Brits. They seem to be abstaining much more than before. They used to be always having clear positions.
Why is that, you think?
Well, I think because they were under the assumption that they leave. So they themselves started to use self-restraint because they decided on issues which wouldn't involve them anymore.
Yeah.
I kept on saying, I don't like that. I think they should continue to come up with a position, because if they continue to say we are not participating, then I think we should cut their salaries now.
Also, we have certainly seen the Conservative Party, the government party's MEPs turning up a lot less and getting less involved in debates. And I agree with you. I don't think that's good, because even if we carry on with the transition, we'll be following these laws,
Still,
for
until
18 months.
that is true.
And probably will carry on doing that, because we need a close trade deal with the EU, and then we'll follow a lot of these laws. Anyway, back to your Twitter person there who said, the bloc voted for this. I think it's really important to come back to what you said about the need for a people's vote, because there has been a lot more information, but more importantly, we found out an awful lot about how this referendum was won. Both the Leave campaigns are being investigated for criminal activity. We found there was a lot of lies shared on Facebook, and all sorts of really dodgy circumstances around how the first referendum worked.
I think it could be for both.
But well, actually, no. Only the Leave side's being prosecuted or being investigated, criminal investigation. But also, if you just look at what was being promised in 2016, whether we think about the £350 million or whether we think about, the German car makers coming to get us this fantastic deal, these promises have just evaporated. So if people voted for something on the basis of those promises,
so you feel that they're better
absolutely have
informed
a right to vote again when they see what Brexit really means.
We will be continuing this discussion after break, but before that, we do have some tweets,
we
right?
have some very interesting comments, actually, that say, as we are still the second largest contributor, then we must have full voting rights, no money without representation. So I guess
this is coming from
Absolutely right. I think that's a very good argument.
All right, you have to hold that thought, because we're going to go on a break first. And again, we're reminding you to call us. The number is 00800 333 7002. And we are asking you whether British MEPs should have full powers after the European parliamentary elections. Does the EU need a Buy Europe strategy? And do you think young people have enough job opportunities in the EU? So do call us and let us know what you think of those topics. We'll be back. Welcome back to Raw Politics, Your Call. So before the break, we were having a lively discussion. The topic that we're talking about is, should British MEPs have full powers after the European parliamentary elections? Because now the MPs in the UK have backed Theresa May's plan to extend the Brexit deadline. So here we are in this situation. So should the British MEPs have full powers?
That's the question we should make to John from Aberdeen, who just called. Hi, John. Thanks for calling. So we'll make the same question. Should the British MEPs have full powers after the UK participates in the European elections? Of course, after having voted Brexit before 3
So what do
years.
you think, John?
Well, I think it's a no-brainer. If the election goes and we elect MEPs, and we're also paying into the European budget, why would anybody in politics suggest that we wouldn't have a say?
Even if you think that some of them will, here some would say, okay, they can be just troublemakers because they will be here temporarily if Brexit does happen. What do you think?
Hold that one.
Okay.
What if we appoint a representative to be in that parliament? We're paying for him. He can say he can say what he wants to on our behalf, and that's the problem that's happened in our parliament. Is that the fact is the MPs are not representing the people.
So,
if you have representation for the people, therefore you have a democracy. If you do it any other way, you are actually flying in the face of democracy.
To this point, Molly.
I mean, I represent 5 million people. They all have very different views. They have 6 MEPs and actually voted more or less exactly like the national picture on Brexit. So they have 3 who support Brexit and 3 that oppose Brexit, and I think they're pretty well represented. But if you think, in a parliamentary situation in Britain, you'd have about 100,000 people and 1 representative. Now, you try to represent everybody, but obviously you're also standing on the basis of a manifesto and on the basis of your party's values and principles and policies. So, this is the problem with Brexit, that you threw in a simplified question, a simple binary question, into what is a very complex representative system, and that's really causing our MPs a lot of difficulties.
I think John wants to reply. John?
Yeah, well, any manufactured product of Labour or Conservative for the manifesto that doesn't represent the people, to me, is illegal.
But the people isn't one thing, is it, John? I mean, there's 65 million people. They all have slightly different views. We're not even really in these sort of leave and remain camps. That's a bit of an artificial way of looking at it. A lot of people had a rather grey area view about it. So, it's very difficult to represent all those people.
There was a black and white situation. Do we stay in or do we leave?
Yeah.
I voted to stay in. But the way that people in the parliament have behaved, it's now, I'm erring on the situation, if it comes to another referendum, I would vote to leave.
But just as a representative, let me say that one of the reasons I am still trying to remain is that I represent the people, for example, in Honda, in Swindon, and I represent a lot of farmers. And so even though they may have voted to leave for whatever reasons, it's my job to protect their jobs, it's my job to protect their futures. And I can't agree with them that their future is best protected by leaving the EU. So as a representative...
Can you tell me what kind of crystal ball you've got?
Well, I can see what will...
Because it doesn't... That is crystal ball stuff, because the fact is nobody knows at the present moment of time whether it will affect our farmers dreadfully or whether motor manufacturing companies will be...
Can I quickly answer the crystal ball
this question?
I'm not relying on a crystal ball. I'm relying on the fact that the CBI and the TUC, so the workers and the managers, have both come out and said how damaging it will be for manufacturing industry, and the opinion also. Let me just get to the end. And the opinion of the National Farmers Union, who are really worried about what's going to happen with farming. So it's not me predicting the future on the basis of a crystal ball. It's people who understand those industries and who are as worried as I am about their future if we go ahead
let's
with
let Hans Olaf reply. And then...
Well, in my previous life, I am in politics only since almost 5 years. In my previous life, I was president of Germany's Federation of Industries, which is the equivalent of the CBI. So I get a lot of feedback from German companies. And I tell you, they are extremely concerned about the economic impact on my country.
Right.
And what is very often overseen and never discussed in this parliament, they always talk about the economic impact on Britain. But they totally forget that this also has a negative impact on the rest of the EU.
Well.
So that's why I think it's right to say it's a lose-lose situation.
All right. Oh, John, thank you very much for calling with your opinion there. That was John from Aberdeen. But I believe we have another caller, Andre from Poland, the other side. Skype, I think. Skype is there. Andre, what do you think? Oh, there you are. I can see you. What do you think? Do you think that British MEPs should have full powers after the European parliamentary elections?
You know, I'm following, this whole issue since, the referendum. As I have or had two companies in the UK, and I have already closed two, and I'm thinking what to do with the next one because of this. And my opinion is everything which was, promised at the referendum, it's not happening. Yeah, it's not what was promised. So it should be given back to the people, a second vote. And many, my friends in the UK, they feel themselves betrayed, apparently. Yeah.
Betrayed, what do you think?
Betrayed, what do you think, Mr. Hüngel?
Well, I fully agree with him. I think this is quite... I think there's only one way out, in my view, for everybody. That is to ask for the second referendum and give the British people a more educated choice than just a binary one. Give them the choice of remain, or give them the choice, and along with that, maybe one or two, maybe three options of what kind of a Brexit. I would predict, having myself been very often in London talking to Brexiteers and Remainers, that next time it will go the other way around. For instance, we all know that very few young people participated in Britain at the last referendum. By the way, somebody told me, I don't know whether it's true, that meanwhile more British died after the referendum than there was a majority for the Brexiteers.
This is true. This is
so I think it is rather likely that the next referendum would be more educated and more representative.
I do, Andre, you're still on the line, right? Okay, I can see you there.
Right.
I do want to bring you back to the question we're asking because, with the upcoming European parliamentary elections, there is a lot of confusion on, would British MEPs have to take part? And now it seems more likely that they will have to take part in those elections. So do you think that if, after the parliamentary elections, if they are here only for a temporary period, should they have full powers as the rest of the other MEPs from the different countries? From Poland, for example. What do you think?
I think Europe should be much more strict, and in a sense maybe just prolong. I mean, they didn't make the decision if there is another referendum. Change the things around, Why not?
Sorry, I missed your last sentence there. Sorry, what did you say, Andre?
Oh, I say, that the European Union should be more strict with the UK, and we had already, one prolongation, and just, maybe say, okay, if you are going to do a democratic decision with a second referendum, then it's fine.
Just to follow up on that, because Andre was saying that the EU should be stricter. We have a comment here from Rosalia Lucharidi on Twitter who said, we've had enough with the immaturity of Tories and their lobbyists. The EU should kick them out. No more extensions. Well, there you go. All right, we will continue this discussion after a short break. So call us 00800 3333 7002, and of course use the hashtag #RawPolitics on social media. And we are asking you, should British MEPs have full powers after the European parliamentary elections? Does the EU need a Buy Europe strategy? We also want to hear from you on that topic. And also, are there enough job opportunities for young people in the EU? All right, we'll be back after a short break. Hello, you're back with Raw Politics, your call. So, before we went on that break, we were talking about whether British MEPs should have full powers after the European parliamentary elections, because it seems like they will be part of the EU elections, which is coming up really soon in May. All right, I think we do have a caller, Effie?
Yeah, we have a line. Let's bring in Elizabeth from Kent. Elizabeth, hello. So, do you think that the British MEPs should really have full powers after the European elections?
Oh, good evening to you. Yes, I do. We voted to leave the EU, And we have been forced into a position where we can't leave because our Parliament can't do what the people have asked, and that is to leave the EU. Now, personally, I think that if the EU are stupid enough to give Mrs May another extension, which pushes us into having to have the elections for MEPs, then yes, we should get full power, because we will be paying out more money to get these people, these MEPs, into the European Parliament. And I believe, I'm not sure, someone said on this programme maybe, that it was illegal not to have British MEPs if we are still in the European Union.
Yeah, Elizabeth, I just wanted to ask, would you participate in the European parliamentary elections?
Oh, yes, of course. And because I've always voted, the trouble is our Parliament is making us feel like they're not doing anything for the people.
So what would you like to see your MEPs do?
I would vote for somebody like UKIP who could go in, and I don't mind if they cause disruptions. It doesn't bother me as long as we get out.
Right.
Can I just say something?
Go ahead, Molly.
Elizabeth, I sit here in the Parliament and I see the representatives from UKIP and I see them shouting rubbish at other speakers and I see them not turning up in the committees and actually looking at the legislation that we're trying to develop here. So I understand that you support them, but I really wish you would look a little bit about what they're doing here, because they're really damaging our reputation as a country. And also, I mean, I have to say I'm really grateful to people like Hans Olaf who are still accepting us as normal members of this Parliament. But, you know, we have caused a lot of trouble. Do you accept that?
Well, no, I don't expect them to be rude. I disagree with that entirely. But I do feel that they are standing up for what many people in the UK want. And we are simply asking to leave a club. Now, this club is extremely unfair. You have 27 other members of this particular club. Only about 8 of them actually pay in more money than they take out. We are one of them. I don't think that some of those people who don't pay in enough money and draw out more should have any say in what we do.
Elizabeth.
So basically, I know it's supposed to be European unity and all this, but it's gone further than that. When we voted to go in, it was for a common market. Then gradually, over the years, our governments have betrayed us and given away more of our democracy to the EU.
All right, Elizabeth, I'll just let Hans Olaf reply to that. Do you acknowledge what Elizabeth is saying? And also there's a lot of concern about the paying more than they're taking out. I think this is the second time it's been brought up on the show today. What do you think?
Well, Britain didn't pay more than they took out. As a matter of fact, it was Margaret Thatcher who got a special deal. I do remember very much, I was younger then, how she put her handbag on the table and said, I want my money back. And Britain got a special deal, a reduced payment scheme from the European Union at that time. By the way, the difference was picked up by Germany.
Right.
And now when Britain leaves, most of the difference will be picked up by Germany again. This is not the reason why I would like Britain to keep in the European Union, because I know that would be counterproductive vis-à-vis my British viewers. But I think it is valuable for the Brexiteers in Britain to recognize that they got a special deal already.
Okay, all right. We'll be going to a short break. Elizabeth from Kent, thanks very much for calling. We will be back after a short break. So the question we're asking you is, should British MEPs have full powers after the European parliamentary elections? We'll be right back. Welcome back to Raw Politics, your call. So before the break, a lot of it, well, all of you have been calling about our Brexit-related question. Surprise, surprise. But the question we're asking is, should British MEPs have full power after the European parliamentary elections? So we do have some comments that Effie's going to read for you.
We have Rosalia Luharidi that says that we had enough with the immaturity of Tories and their lobbies, so you should kick them out. Yeah. No more extensions and a new referendum for Scotland. Also, we have Gary that talked with him
earlier,
say that he's enough, he's fed up with Brexit, even him.
And Sue is also saying As we are still the second largest contributor, then we must have full voting rights and no money without representation. So there you go. All right, we do have another caller. We have David from Kilbride in Scotland. David, what do you think? We're talking about the parliamentary elections. Should British MEPs have full powers after that?
Well, obviously they're paying into it, they should do. But what I was going to ask was, I mean, Scotland has been taken out against its will. Should the European Union not be doing more to help the people of Scotland stay within the European Union?
Well, there's a question. Who would like to take that? Hans?
Well, I think it's a very good question, but I would like to expand it. I'm working on it since about 12 months. I think the European Union should in general do more to support the Remainers in Great Britain and give a face-saving way out to those Brexiteers who realize what they have done. And I think that it would be highly overdue for the European Commission, for the Council, for Merkel, Mr. Macron, to tell the British, look, we want you to stay. And if there's anything we can do for you so you could stay, we are willing to consider it. Maybe another special deal on immigration or whatever. But give the British an opportunity to stay in Europe.
David, I want to ask you if the elections, so the elections will take place. Are you going to vote?
Yes, of course, yes. I think most Scottish people will vote.
Okay. And Molly, you wanted to reply?
Yeah, just addressing the Scottish part of this question. I mean, the European Union from the beginning has been very careful about the constitutional impact and who has responsibility for what. And they've kept out of the discussion that's happening in Britain. And I think, to be fair, I think they've had to do that. But I think it's grossly unfair that Scotland is being dragged out of the European Union against its will. And as a Green, I support independence for Scotland. And I supported the independence side in the referendum that was held in Scotland.
All right. I'd like to bring it up.
One little point to that.
Okay, David.
The EU is quite happy to offer Northern Ireland a special treatment. If it can offer Northern Ireland special treatment, then why not Scotland?
Well, in fact, what's happening with Northern Ireland is that because of the special status of Northern Ireland, the whole of the UK is actually being kept in a different relationship with Europe. But that would be different if Scotland voted to leave the UK. But I think the point you raise here that's really interesting is the pressure that Brexit is putting on what we call the United Kingdom. And I think it's quite interesting that we even call it the United Kingdom.
I just want to bring in something I think that I'm seeing here. The Tusk, the EU Council President, said he proposes extended Brexit delay, but not more than a year. So there's at least we have a timeline there. David, very quickly, do you think that the British MEPs that do get into the Parliament, should they have a say if they're only going to be here for a year maybe?
I think legally they have to.
Okay, so you don't think that it should be limited anyway, or make decisions that would affect the rest of the 27, as you were saying, that some of them hold back actually in the decision-making process rather than getting involved.
But the thing is, what would you expect from your MEPs to do when they are elected for this 1 year, let's say, if this is the case?
Well, obviously, being Scottish, my MEPs will be Scottish MEPs, and they support the European Union, so they will do everything they can to help the European Union. But in England, you're going to have UKIP and the Conservatives doing everything they can to cause disruption.
Okay, all right. Thank you for that, David. I mean, would you like to add to what David was saying on the Scottish issue as well?
No, I think I, of course, also watched the result of the Scottish referendum, and I'm afraid that if Britain leaves, that might refresh
this is
independence
a faster,
Scotland.
moving story, as we know, and we have the European Council summit tomorrow on Brexit, of course. We'd like to thank
the EU leaders.
We'd like to thank all of our callers for calling in on the Brexit, the favorite topic of a lot of our callers. Thank you very much for watching us tonight. This is Raw Politics, your call, and do join us again tomorrow, same time, same place.
Have a nice evening.